Learning how to effectively use a mask in Photoshop is perhaps one of the most important things that you can learn. And here what I want to do is focus in on how we can begin to work with masks. And I want to talk about how we can make a selection and turn that selection into a mask. And I want to look at how we can then modify the mask, either painting on it or moving it around. And I also want to talk about how we can create a mask which is attached to an adjustment layer. Now, you actually already know a lot about masks. It's just that we haven't formally talked about them. So let's begin here. What I'm going to do with this photograph is I want to start off by choosing one of the selection tools. And here I'm going to select the elliptical marquee tool and just click and drag out a selection. You can see we have the marching ants showing me that this area is selected. And what you can do is once you have a selection, you can create a mask based on that selection. To do that, just go over to the Layers panel and click on the Add Layer Mask icon. All of a sudden, we'll see a new little icon attached to the image layer. And this icon is a mask. And the area of the icon which is black is concealing the image. The area which is white is revealing. That's why you'll often hear people say white reveals and black conceals in regards to working with masks in Photoshop. Now, what does that actually mean? Well, the white area here is just showing me this part of the image. The black area is hiding the other parts. Now, it's not deleted, it's still there. And let me show you how we can begin to get some of that back. Well, the great thing about a mask is you can constantly make changes to it. So for example, if we click into the mask rather than the image, notice how you can click into the image. There are white brackets around the image. Click into the mask, you'll see those white brackets there. And then we can grab our paintbrush tool, and then we can paint with either white or black. Here I'll paint with white at 100% opacity. And you can see I have a pretty big brush, and it has soft edges here, so it's going to be a nice soft edge. And I can simply just start to paint. And as I paint, I'm changing the mask, and we're seeing more of the image. And I can paint over here as well, or over here, and I can continually modify the way that this looks. Now, if we paint with black, here I'll choose black, what I can then do is I can remove from view this part of the image. Now, I'm not deleting anything. It's always there. It's just hidden behind the mask. And so what the mask helps us to do is to isolate certain areas of our photograph. And what's really fun about masks is that you can edit them, as you can see here. You can also constantly change them. For example, you'll notice that these two items are linked together. There's a little link between them. If we unlink them by clicking on that, and then choose the Move tool, we can actually move this mask around. So we're just revealing a different portion of the image. Now we can relink them. If they're linked together when we make the movement, we'll see that both of these move in unison with each other. So in other words, we have some flexibility here in regards to making movements or changes to the type of mask that we have in this case. Another thing that we can do is if we look at this mask here and then go up to what's called the Properties panel. In the Properties panel, we have a few controls for our mask. One of them is density. As I drag this down, what we're going to see is more of the original image come back. You can see I have more and more of that image come back, or we can have less of it. So we can control the density or the intensity of the mask. Now, feathering, we already know about that, right? The more feather, the softer the edge. And so here I can soften out the edges. And we can see we have really soft edges, or I can bring this back to the original state of the edge that we have there. We've looked at mask, edge, and color range already in this course, but we haven't talked about invert. When you click on invert, it will flip-flop the mask. So now the white area is over here, revealing that part of the image. The black area is concealing this area of the photograph. So again, there's a lot that we can do when it comes to customizing masks. All right, in order to talk a little bit more about how masks work, what I want to do next is just delete the mask. So I'm going to drag it down to the trash can icon, and I'll say delete. If I said apply or we clicked apply, it would actually cut out the image. I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to hit delete. And now I'm just back to the entire photograph. And next, I want to talk about how we can have masks attached to adjustments. For example, we'll click on our adjustment layer icon for hue saturation and maybe make a really dramatic change to the color in the image. Now, when we make a change to a photograph or add an adjustment layer, you can see that it has a pre-built mask right here, and it's white, revealing the blue shift in the entire photograph. Yet we can actually customize that. Let's say that we only want to have the blue, I don't know, maybe in the upper portion of the image. Well, here I can grab a brush, and then paint with black. I'm going to make my brush even bigger so I can just paint a little bit more quickly. And I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I don't want this color change in this part of the image. In this way, you can see how now we just have that adjustment here in the upper half of the image. Here's our before and after. And this is completely non-destructive. In other words, we can always change or modify this after the fact. If we don't like this effect, we'll just turn off the layer or delete the layer. No pixels have been harmed. And that's one of the great advantages of working with masks. Masks give you the ability to make selective adjustments without really committing to them, so you have that extra added and sometimes really needed flexibility. Let's look at a couple more things here. With this mask, if we go back to our properties panels we've seen before, we can go to the tab where we have controls for the mask, and here we can invert this as we've seen before. We can say, you know what? I actually want to reveal the color change down below and hide it up above. No big deal. Or perhaps we want to change the adjustment. Well, if you double click on your adjustment layer icon right there, it will reopen the controls for whatever adjustment you made. And maybe rather than blue, we want to have this lower area green. So we can make those changes on the fly. We have all of this built-in flexibility. Or maybe we just want more saturation. We can change that in that way. So the great thing about working with masks is they give us this flexibility, and they also give us flexibility in regards to being able to modify this with some controls, whether that's painting. And just to review, we grab our brush, and here we can paint perhaps with white. And as I paint with white, we're bringing in more of this adjustment into other areas of the photograph. If we paint with black, we're going to conceal or hide this adjustment from certain areas of the image. And if we paint with a really soft edge brush, we're going to see a smooth transition. If we paint with a brush that has a hard edge, as you can see here, we're going to see there's a more defined edge in that part of the image. We can change the edge either by the way we paint, or also, as we've seen, we can go up here to the Properties panel, underneath Mask, and we can increase the feather value. As I increase this, watch that edge, and watch how it becomes much smoother and softer. It's a much smoother transition from one color to the other. And so here we can dial this in to find just the right effect that we want to create with our particular adjustment. All right, well, that's quite a bit about masking, yet my hope is that this primer gives you some insight into how we can begin to work with masks. Sometimes what we do is start off with the selection and then just add a mask to a layer. Other times, we'll work with adjustments which have built-in masks. We can then modify those in order to customize the way it affects the image. Well, now that we've seen how all of this works, let's take a look at how we can put this into practice, and let's do that in the next few movies.